Hello everyone, Ruslan Belov here again, and this is our evening review of the situation on the Ukrainian front. I'd like to start with information from the Odessa area, where shipping statistics have come in. Over the past week, 31 sea vessels used by the AFU were damaged. This includes 23 dry cargo ships, 4 bulk carriers, 2 tugboats, 1 lifting vessel, and 1 landing craft. The total number of damaged sea vessels for the period from July 18 to July 31, 2026, stands at 82, a genuinely huge figure. And as I understand it, this also includes vessels in the area of the port of Mykolaiv, since a significant portion of the ships were hit precisely there. It's striking that Russian forces have been stationed not far from where Ukrainian vessels were sailing to Mykolaiv, meaning they've had these ships in plain sight, constantly, for years. Blocking shipping in the Mykolaiv area is naturally easier, since it can be attacked directly from land using FPV drones and similar means. As a reminder, Ukraine itself initiated this stage of escalation in the Crimea and Sea of Azov area by striking Russia's fleet, which uses sea shipments as the cheapest form of transport. Ukraine also managed to damage a considerable number of vessels. Of course, all these ships, both Russian and Ukrainian, will be repaired, and I think almost all of them will return to service, since in most cases the damage isn't critical. Naturally, no one will bring back the sailors who died in the process, roughly 20 to 30 on each side. What's interesting is how quickly Russia managed to create major problems for Ukraine. Literally within a couple of days of the decision being made, a huge number of vessels were hit. At the moment, shipping in the Odessa area is reportedly completely halted. Insurance rates have skyrocketed, and no one particularly wants to risk their life or their property. Now let's move to the front line itself, starting with the Sloviansk direction, where footage emerged of Russian forces advancing toward Nikolaivka, or possibly toward the Sloviansk thermal power plant, which sits right on the edge of the settlement. This facility is enormous. Its capacity is 2,100 megawatts, which is a massive figure for a single station. So the Russian army continues its advance along the Siversky Donets Canal, located right here. Beyond the canal is the small settlement of Orikuvatka. The terrain here is heavily wooded. AFU defenses are extremely strong, but Russian forces are gradually finding the key to Ukrainian defenses, and the advance is proceeding at a slow but steady pace. If Nikolaivka is taken, it would become a powerful staging base for the Russian army's further push on Sloviansk. Many people don't realize this, but terrain matters a great deal here. Sloviansk itself sits in a lowland, meaning FPV drone support from this position would be the most realistic option for the Russian army. That's why a bridgehead in this area is needed, and needed in strength. Despite its powerful defensive lines, if the AFU loses Nikolaivka, defending the city from the east will become very difficult for them. The Russian army would gain an advantage in drones and heavy aviation strikes. It appears Russian command has concluded that the only real chance of gaining a foothold in any city is to first use aviation to destroy the high-rise buildings where AFU FPV operators sit on the upper floors, so that work targets this group specifically, while the infantry's separate objective is to infiltrate unnoticed into the city, establish and reinforce an initial foothold. After that, it's important to organize supply and reinforce the area, and only then move into direct combat and push deeper into the city itself. This was exactly the strategy used to take Kostiantynivka. Currently, the only approach that works when Ukrainian FPV drones fly far enough and are somewhat more advanced technologically. We often see Ukrainian tanks getting almost to the front line, while Russian tanks fail to reach it, because Ukrainian FPV drones fly deep into the Russian rear. That's essentially the logic behind the current approach. It's the only method that's currently proven capable of taking a city. Nothing else has been worked out so far. What's interesting is that the Ukrainian side also hasn't come up with anything new for assaults. They're trying to do the same thing, but their infantry situation is far worse, and preparing 1,000 soldiers for large-scale assault operations is a serious problem for them. Assault troops run out quickly. It's a very costly undertaking, and all counterattacks and attacks lead to significant losses. The map shows Russian drone operators are heavily focused on Sloviansk, striking it with a large number of both FPV drones and aviation. so the gradual softening of AFU defenses inside the city itself is already underway. We're waiting for a solid breakthrough toward Nikolaivka and a foothold there, and things will get considerably more interesting from that point. Now let's move a bit south to Kostiantynivka, where reports say the settlement of Stinky has been fully taken by Russian forces. The small pocket of territory near Chasiv Yar has remained under Ukrainian control for a very long time and hasn't been fully cleared yet, but everything is heading in that direction. Until Kostiantynivka was taken, the AFU tried at any cost to hold on to this important bridgehead, since from here it's possible to approach not only Kostiantynivka, but also Kramatorsk from the south. As the map shows, this area has extremely strong defenses. A huge amount of concrete was poured here, going back to 2014. Russian forces have, for the first time in a long while, started striking western Ukraine. You'll recall that just yesterday, there were strikes on Lviv and Ivano-Frankivsk, and today came a powerful strike on Khmelnytsky. With a massive mushroom cloud of smoke rising over the city, I mentioned this earlier today, and now I'll show you the footage of the explosion itself. Locals reported hearing not just one blast, but multiple secondary detonations afterward. Overall, it's 100% clear this was another hit on an ammunition depot. Why anyone would think to place it right in a residential area remains a big mystery. This closely resembles Vishnev 2.0, when a depot near Kiev was struck the same way, and the detonation devastated the entire surrounding neighborhood, because someone thought it was a good idea to store ammunition in residential blocks without warning the local population. Overall, this is a complete disaster, friends, since both then and today civilians were killed once again. Today, the Russian army took 2 new settlements, one in Kharkiv region and the second in Donbass. And in Donbass, things are especially brutal. Footage recently emerged from the Lyman sector of the front. There, the AFU attempted another counterattack, and the footage captured several AFU soldiers being literally shredded. As a reminder, a great many volunteers fight on the Lyman front, people who joined territorial defense at the very start of the conflict. They clearly came to regret that choice. In Sumy region, Russian forces took the village of Moritsia yesterday, right here, and are now continuing to clear this adjacent pocket, trying to take this wooded area and the small hamlet of Sadki in order to link up these 2 border bridgeheads. But the main Russian breakthrough today is happening in Kharkiv region. A couple of months ago, there was roughly the same kind of border bridgehead here as in Sumy region, a security strip along the border. But it has now grown so much, especially after the capture of Vovchansk, that Russian forces have advanced from here deeper into Kharkiv region. And the key settlement holding up AFU defenses across this entire sector is the town of Belyi Kolodiaz. There's actually quite a bit here, including some multi-story development. But it's not particularly large. According to the 2013 census, only 4,000 people lived here, and now, of course, that number is even lower. So the AFU doesn't really have the option of fighting street to street between high-rises the way it did in the larger cities of Donbass, like Kostiantynivka. There's also no massive industrial zone here. The main AFU stronghold in Belyi Kolodiaz is the sugar factory, located right here, which is essentially what they're holding on to. The only lifeline bringing whatever supplies still reach the AFU here is the T2104 highway, running toward Prikolotny and the district center of Velikai Burluk. But it would be more accurate to say it used to bring supplies, because today Russian troops fully took the village of Verivka, which sits right along that highway. Footage of the fighting for this settlement has been released by the Russian side. So this supply route is now either under complete fire control, the distance is only about 200 meters, or possibly already physically cut off by Russian troops. In addition, yesterday Russian forces completely pushed the AFU out of neighboring Yurchenkov, which has also been fully taken. So, as we can see, the noose around Belyi Kolodiaz is tightening rapidly. Friends, feel free to place your bets in the comments on how much longer you think the AFU defense here will hold. My guess is it's a matter of days. And once this settlement collapses, the road to Prikolotny opens up, and eventually to the district center of Velikai Burluk itself. Its loss would automatically collapse this entire northeastern section of Kharkiv region, and that is precisely the Russian army's objective for the summer offensive campaign in Kharkiv region. Once this whole pocket is cleared, the Russian army will finally gain a reliable logistics route to Kupiansk from the western side. Naturally, the territory under Russian control in Kharkiv region will grow considerably after clearing this settlement, and the Russian army will have the prospect of pushing south to the settlement of Chuhuiv, east of Shevchenkove, and to Kupiansk itself on the Oskil River. Straightening out this entire sector is, of course, more likely a plan for 2027. In Dnipropetrovsk region, Russian forces managed to restore control over the village of Kalinivsky, right here. For a long time, the AFU launched wave after wave of attacks here, but as we can see, the counterattack clearly failed. There was no breakthrough into the rear of the Russian Huliaipol grouping. They only managed to nibble away a couple of small villages that were already floating in the grey zone anyway. And now, as we see, the Russian side is rapidly reclaiming them one by one. In Zaporizhia region, footage has emerged of Russian drone operators carrying out a large number of strikes on Ukrainian rear areas, hitting cell towers, AFU vehicles, and logistics in general, precisely along the roads that supply the AFU grouping to the south. So we're seeing Russian forces reaching deep into the AFU rear and causing serious disruption there, or as the military puts it, keeping them terrorized. As this war has shown, logistics is exactly the weak point that, once pressured, gives virtually any side an advantage, and both sides try to exploit that wherever they can. This has happened before. The same Ukrainian grouping in Kursk region collapsed almost instantly once it lost its logistics. The situation here is quite different right now. US-Iran confrontation, CBS News, citing multiple sources, reports that the United States and Israel are preparing what could be one of the harshest bombing campaigns to date against Iran's energy infrastructure, power plants and refineries, with strikes possible as early as this weekend. The plan reportedly came up during a Trump cabinet meeting at Camp David, where some White House political aides pushed back against it. Trump himself told reporters, "We'll be hitting them very hard," while Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said the US will win, and that Iran will not have a nuclear weapon under Trump's watch. No final decision had been made as of Friday afternoon. An Israeli official, meanwhile, said Israel is unaware of any decision to resume full-scale operations and hasn't been asked to join. This builds on a broader picture. US Central Command has been enforcing a naval blockade on Iranian ports, redirecting dozens of commercial vessels, and Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said days earlier that Israel wants to hit Iranian energy targets, but Washington has been holding back, specifically over fears that Iran would retaliate against neighboring countries and trigger a global oil crisis. That fear is the whole ballgame here. Iran has repeatedly signaled that any serious threat to its economy or energy sector would be met with strikes on whatever targets it can reach across the region. And that's a long list. Tanker traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, energy and military infrastructure in Gulf states seen as aligned with the US-Israel coalition, possibly Saudi Arabia and the UAE. If Washington actually greenlights strikes on Iran's power plants and refineries, the scenario Israel's own defense minister flagged, Iran lashing out regionally rather than absorbing the hit quietly, becomes the thing to watch. A full-blown Gulf-wide oil shock and other regional players getting pulled in either as targets or as reluctant participants isn't a fringe possibility at that point. It's the default risk the US has apparently been weighing this whole time before deciding whether to pull the trigger.